In today's video, we are looking at the two longest-lived children of Queen Victoria. Prince Arthur, who lived to the age of 91, and Princess Beatrice, who lived all the way to 1944, dying at the age of 87. The two were the last surviving children of the Queen and one of the last links to her. On this list, we firstly have Prince Arthur, the Duke of Connaught and Strathearn. He was born as Arthur William Patrick Albert on May 1, 1850 at Buckingham Palace. He was the seventh child of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. His baptism took place on June 22 at the private chapel of Buckingham Palace. The young prince was named after the Duke of Wellington, with whom he also shared his birthday. Arthur was educated by private tutors and quickly became his mother's favorite child. Arthur soon developed an interest in the army and as such enrolled at the Royal Military College in 1866. After completing his education, he was made a lieutenant in the Corps of Royal Engineers. Shortly after, he was transferred to the Regiment of Artillery. Lastly, he moved over to the Rifle Brigade, which was his late father's regiment. In summary, Arthur would have a long career as an army officer. He served across the world in South Africa, Canada, Egypt, and India. In January 1870, Arthur visited Washington, D.C., where he met with the then President Ulysses Grant. While stationed in Canada, Arthur would frequently be invited to balls and garden parties and would become the first member of the royal family to attend the opening of the Parliament in Ottawa. He was awarded the Fenian Medal after he successfully fended off the enemy during the Battle of Echo Hill. Arthur was popular in Canada, and in 1869 he was therefore given the title Chief of the Six Nations by the Iroquois of the Grand River Reserve. Arthur would further go on to be promoted to the rank of lieutenant colonel, colonel, and finally general. In 1874, Arthur was created a royal peer and therefore became the Duke of Connaught and Strathearn and the Earl of Sussex. After his elder brother Alfred passed away in 1899, Arthur came into the direct line of succession to the Duchy of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. He, however, decided to renounce his rights to the duchy and pass them on to his nephew, Prince Charles Edward. Arthur married Princess Louise Margaret of Prussia. Louise was a great-niece of the German Emperor Wilhelm I. The couple married on March 13, 1879 at St. George's Chapel, Windsor Castle. The couple was described as a love match, and their ceremony was a grand affair. Together they had 3 children, Margaret, Arthur, and Patricia. The family resided at their country home, Bagshot Park, and after 1900 at Clarence House. Arthur and Margaret undertook many royal duties. As such, they toured Canada in 1890, stopping in all major cities. In 1903, they represented Edward VII at the Delhi Durbar. In 1911, Arthur was appointed Governor-General of Canada by King George V. He, his wife, and his youngest daughter therefore moved across the ocean. They would spend their time undertaking constitutional and ceremonial tasks. His spare time was spent ice skating, camping, hunting, and fishing. During the First World War, Arthur served as Colonel-in-Chief of the Cape Town Highlanders Regiment. However, he remained in Canada for the duration of the war. He saw the need for military training for Canadian troops and would visit the troops before their departure to Europe. His wife, Margaret, worked for the St. John Ambulance, the Red Cross, and other organizations supporting the war efforts. Arthur's term as Governor-General ended in 1916. After his time in Canada, he continued to undertake a number of public engagements internationally. His wife Margaret died in 1917, aged 57, of bronchitis. His eldest child, also named Margaret, who by then was the Crown Princess of Sweden, died in 1920 while pregnant with her 6th child. Arthur withdrew himself from public life by 1928. His only son, Arthur, died in 1938 of stomach cancer. Arthur died on January 16, 1942, at the age of 91. His funeral was held at St. George's Chapel and his body was placed in the royal vault. He was reburied 2 months later in the royal burial ground at Frogmore. He was Queen Victoria's last surviving son. Lastly, we have Queen Victoria's last surviving child, Princess Beatrice. Beatrice Mary Victoria Theodora was born on April 14, 1857 at Buckingham Palace. Her birth sparked controversy as the Queen decided to use chloroform as pain relief. Beatrice was baptized in the private chapel at Buckingham Palace 2 months after her birth. As the youngest of Queen Victoria's children, she soon became favored. As her father died when she was only 4 years old and her elder siblings began to marry and have children of their own, Beatrice became a companion to her grieving mother. The Queen would call her baby throughout her childhood. After her last sibling married in 1871, her mother became ever more dependent on Beatrice. Beatrice herself said about the situation, "I don't like weddings at all. I shall never be married. I shall stay with my mother." She served as her mother's unofficial secretary, writing letters and helping her with political correspondence. Queen Victoria was also against marrying off her youngest daughter. However, there still were some suitors on the market for Beatrice's hand in marriage. One of them was Napoleon Eugene. Those plans, however, were dropped when the prince died in 1879. Eventually, Beatrice fell in love with Prince Henry of Battenberg. After confronting her mother with her intention to marry the prince, the Queen responded by not talking to her for the next 7 months. It would take persuasion by Beatrice's siblings for the Queen to start talking to her again. Victoria eventually agreed on the condition that Prince Henry and Beatrice reside with her. The wedding took place on July 23, 1885. After their honeymoon, the couple returned to live with the Queen. Despite now being married, Beatrice fulfilled her promise and continued to be her mother's secretary and confidant. Beatrice's world was shattered when she received the news of her husband's death in January 1896. He had been fighting in the Anglo-Asante War and had departed in December 1895. While there, he contracted malaria and passed away. Beatrice only received the news about his death while waiting for his return home. Beatrice was heartbroken and went into mourning. Almost exactly 5 years later, Queen Victoria passed away. Beatrice was again heartbroken. She continued her public appearances. She was not close with her brother, the now King Edward VII, and therefore did not belong to his inner circle. Beatrice now spent most of her time transcribing and editing her mother's journals. This was a huge task as the journals were dated all the way back to 1831. She was in charge of removing any private material. In the end, the journals were only a third as long as the originals. The whole task took over 30 years and ended in 1931. Today, the surviving notebooks are kept in the Royal Archives at Windsor Castle. Beatrice's daughter Anna married Spanish King Alfonso XIII in 1906. At this time, Beatrice was living at Osborne Cottage. Beatrice was once again devastated when her son Maurice died during the First World War. It was also around this time that she began retiring from public life. During her later years, Beatrice moved to Brandridge Park. There, she died in her sleep on October 26, 1944. After her funeral service, her body was placed in the royal vault. A year later, it was moved inside a joint tomb alongside her husband in St. Mildred's Church. Beatrice was Queen Victoria's last surviving child.